So I'm going to look at taking a bearing now. So I want to take a bearing from the summit of Gernwigau to the summit cairn here on Drosgol. So personally, I like using this line to help me line up, because I find that gets a little bit distorted, but I could just as easily use the edge of the compass. I'm going to carefully take my time, line up, making sure that if I'm going from Gernwigau to Drosgol, the direction of travel arrow is pointing in the same direction that I'm going. I'm now going to hold that really firmly, and I'm going to turn the bezel so that this arrow on my compass lines up perfectly facing north along the grid lines. And again, I'm going to take my time and make sure that's super accurate. It doesn't matter what this one's doing at all at this stage, because this one is always going to point north. So unless I'm doing this orientated facing north, it's always going to be pointing somewhere random at the moment, but that's fine. It's this one that wants to be facing north on the grid line on the map. So just check that one more time. Direction of travel arrow going where I want it to go. Everything properly lined up, and this arrow on my compass lined up with north on the map. Now time to take off and follow the bearing. What are the different kinds of norths? Well, on this OS map, just like on other OS maps, we can find this area here, which shows us that there is a magnetic north, a grid north, and a true north. Now, true north, that points to the North Pole. Grid north, that talks about the north that goes straight up the grid lines on the map. And then we've also got magnetic north, which is in a slightly different place again, and that moves over time. Now, don't worry about understanding exactly how, although you can look into that if you want more detail. And on the map here, it tells us that it's dated 2010, and it tells us at that date what the difference was between grid north, so what we're looking at on the map, and magnetic north, what we're looking at using the compass. And it also tells us how that difference changes over time. So we can work out what we need to change on our compass to make our bearing accurate, depending on where we are and what date it is. Now, all this sounds quite confusing. If you want more information about exactly what you have to change in your location and your date, you can always just look it up on the internet rather than working out the sums. If I'm giving a bearing for someone to follow, or following a bearing out of a guidebook, for example, that relates to these numbers around the outside. So if I was following a bearing of 20 degrees, I would spin this and line up with 20 degrees. So I've taken the bearing on the map. I now want to follow it on the terrain in front of me in the mountains. Now I need to consider whether it's worth adjusting my bearing for magnetic variation. If I was making that adjustment, going from the map to the ground, I'm going to add on that tiny amount of degrees. So the way I think about that, small map to big world, number gets bigger. Confusing thing is, in a few years, that is going to change and start to go the other way. But don't worry about this too much at the moment. If we want to check out magnetic variation, you can always look that up on the internet. So once I've made any adjustments that I might decide to make for magnetic variation, I'm going to turn my whole body and follow the direction of travel arrow. So both the floaty arrow that faces north and the drawn on arrow on my compass are both lined up together. And I've got another video that you might find useful at this point, which talks about accurately walking on a bearing.